Hello and welcome to our telesummit and podcast series on preventing cancer. I'm Jenny Lamorgan, owner of greenwomanstore.com, where we enjoy creating educational tools like this telesummit on topics important to us as women. I'm excited to be here with our guest, Susan Moss. She's the author of Keep Your Breasts, Preventing Breast Cancer the Natural Way. Deepak Chopra says about Susan's book that all women considering any form of breast cancer treatment should read this book. Susan's work focuses on the disease of cancer itself, explaining the causes, prevention, and most importantly, natural healing and prevention without surgery, drugs, radiation that debilitate the patient. This telesummit is about our health, it's about politics, what we know and what we need to know about cancer, and how to prevent it. We're talking about medical practices, natural healing, our environment, and our science. We've invited women experts whose passion it is to educate and encourage other women toward health and political action. So let me introduce you to our guest. Susan Moss began saving lives as a teenager, working as a lifeguard. She helped establish the Suicide Prevention Center in 1966 in Reno, Nevada, and it's still in operation today. Susan has a master's degree in psychology, and after further study, she became an exhibiting artist, and her art is shown in galleries and museums around the world. 12 years ago, she invented the MOTEP program to heal herself of breast cancer and uterine cancer. Her book, Keep Your Breasts, is in its sixth printing in 3 languages. Susan speaks worldwide on the natural healing of cancer. She has appeared on national TV in the U.S. and Canada, and she's done hundreds of radio shows around the world. We're happy to have her with us today. Welcome, Susan Moss, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jenny. I would appreciate a little update. I have written a second book, Survive Cancer, and these are people who use my MOTEP natural healing program to get well from all kinds of cancers or figured out their own program. And these people are so strong. They're just wonderful, wonderful people.
Very important work. And I'm hoping to hear some examples of from that book that you can share with us today during the interview.
Yes, so I have 2 books on natural healing now. One, How I Heal Myself, contrasted with Kimberly, who did only the medical treatment, and you know what happened to her. And and Survive Cancer, which people sometimes started the medical treatment and saw it wasn't working and finally withdrew from that and figured it out for themselves.
All right, well, let's start right there. Let's start with talking about your own personal experience with cancer. And when were you diagnosed?
I was actually diagnosed almost 24 years ago. It'll be 24 years in December, breast and uterine cancer in December 1990.
My goodness, okay.
And I had the 2 tumors, and I started going downhill very rapidly, being stage 4 already. And my doctor wanted me to see a surgeon and called me every day, and I said no.
And why were you against the surgery? What did you know 20 years ago?
Well, 24 years ago, I already had healing experience going back to the 70s, which is even further back. I had a lump in my neck from using acrylic and Rollex paint. I'm an artist also, and I was using big barrels of Rollex, which I did not know was carcinogenic. There was no label that stated that. And I developed a lump in my neck, and I went to UCLA as an outpatient, and they said it was right on the verge of cancer, and if I continued using that material, I would have cancer, and if I didn't get rid of the lump in 1 year, they would operate and take it out. And at that time, I had a year, so I developed a very simple 3-step program consisting of carrot juice, running on the beach, which I couldn't even run. I was very weak. But I had an architect friend, and we built up over time so that I got more strength as we went along. And then the visualization, and this is how I would do it, Ginny. I would turn on loud rock music, and I would visualize the little white men in white coats going down with a rope, and they would tie the rope around the lump, and then I would pull it out, getting the men and the lump to the beat of the music.
Wow. And that's certainly energizing.
Oh, thanks.
Good.
Well, during the year, I did have the same symptoms as cancer. I lost a lot of weight. I turned yellow-green. I couldn't get up on my steps at my house. Fatigue. I looked like death warmed over. But gradually, I rebuilt my body back into health so that when I went back to the doctor in the year that he gave me, I had no lump. Much finished off.
Right. Well, congratulations on
thanks.
healing.
Well, I did have some healing experience so that when I got breast and uterine cancer in the 90s, in the beginning of the 90s, I then developed a further program of 20 points called MOTEP, and this is real thorough because I actually did have cancer. It wasn't borderline anymore. It was real cancer.
Wow. And is the MOTEP program, is that what's in your book, Keep Your Breast?
Yeah, the program is outlined in both books. If you have cancer or are worried about cancer, if you have a lot of relatives that have cancer or you just want to know about cancer, I would recommend reading both books in tandem. Keep Your Breast gives the outline of the program and how I developed it and went on it and what happened to me when I went on it, as opposed to my friend Kimberly, who was 34 when she found a lump herself in her breast and went to the doctor for a mammogram. The mammogram was negative, and so was mine, by the way. But they did the biopsy for Kimberly anyway, and it was cancer. So they cut her breast off, and then guess where the cancer showed up again?
So, Susan, when you're talking about your MOTEP program, is that what's included in your book, in your first book, Keep Your Breast?
Yes, I do outline the MOTEP program, the 20-point program that I outlined for myself, and then I went on it, and I contrasted that with the medical. Kimberly, my friend, found a lump herself. She was 34 years old. They did the mammogram. It was negative, but they went ahead with the biopsy, and it was cancer. And they cut her breast off, and guess where the cancer showed up again?
Where?
You don't have any idea.
Well, sometimes it goes into bone cancer, and sometimes it goes into the breast. But did it show up in the uterus? Is it the same place that you got it?
This is a shock. It showed up in the same place where her breast used to be.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
So that's when I woke up, Ginny, what I call the Santa Claus notion that you can cut disease out of the body. I woke up to the idea that mastectomy does not, quote unquote, cure breast cancer. It does not prevent breast cancer. That cancer is a systemic disease affecting all your blood. And in the book Survive Cancer, I do have a blood chart showing you what all your blood looks like when you are diagnosed with cancer. And that's not just the blood in your breast or whatever organ is affected. In other words, you never have a local disease. And this is a misconception of the medical. It just makes me mad when I read about someone like the head of Chase Bank that just got diagnosed with throat cancer, and he says he's going to keep working because it's confined to his throat, and he's going to be cured and all that by the doctors with chemo and radiation, because this is not what's going to happen to him.
Mhm. You're saying it'll show up someplace else, or?
Well, it already is someplace else. And
Uh-huh.
if they did a blood test, which you can do with a black microscope, it's called black microscopy, dark field microscopy, they would see that all his blood looks different. And in my book, Survive Cancer, I do give you that chart so you can see what blood looks like in different conditions. So I show you what normal blood looks like and what it looks like when you have various diseases, when you're under stress, etc., and then what it looks like when you have cancer.
Very interesting. Very interesting. All right. And your book, your first book, Keep Your Breath, is about the body's own healing, ability to heal and repair, using diet, exercise, visualization, meditation, spirituality, mending negative relationships, all of those things you used yourself. And your own situation with cancer was certainly an inspiration, but it sounds like your intuitive knowledge that our bodies can heal was also your inspiration to write it and to share this information with others.
Oh, absolutely. When I saw what they did to Kimberly, and by the way, I used no medications. I saw how they chemoed her. Her hair fell out, vomiting constantly, losing weight, and finally the bone marrow transplant where she couldn't even drink orange juice, and the radiation that broke 2 of her rib bones. And they just turned her into a total robot. And I saw what they did to her, and I wouldn't touch the medical with a 10-foot pole, to tell you the truth, with cancer. People need to know before they get cancer. That's why I wrote my books. Both of them are for prevention as well as healing. Because if you read it now, and so many people wait until they have cancer to get my books, I really would like people to who are healthy and well to read the books now. It'll save their life in all probability, because they can go on the MOTEP program now. I'm still on it 24 years later, and it served me so well. I hardly ever get sick, and I swim 3 times a week at the Y, and I go to the spa when I have any aches or pains, or even just to go. And I think it's important to do all 20 points on the MOTEP program. For instance, if you have a death in the family, for instance, if you lose your spouse, that's the number 1 stress. And for the next 2 years, you're vulnerable to cancer. Second worst stress is divorce, and third is separation. So you know these emotional stresses are the worst stresses you can go through.
And when you're talking about the blood, do you see a similarity between the blood of a stressed person and one who has cancer?
Yes, there is some similarity, and there's some difference. It might be that cancer is just a little further along. In other words, if you're under stress, you do get a pattern that looks similar to cancer, but when you have cancer, it's much worse.
And what about the mending of negative relationships? That's really interesting to bring that in. Is that one of the MOTEP steps, or is
yes,
that?
it is.
It is.
Oh, it's definitely. I think anger is one of the big factors in cancer, and resentment. Besides grief and holding on to these negative feelings does depress the immune system. It also depresses you, and that makes you vulnerable to cancer.
And that's an interesting connection between depression and a depressed immune system.
Yes, they're very connected, and I do show you that in the books. I found that in Vogue magazine, that when you look at the blood of a depressed person, the white blood cells are not moving.
And is that a regular blood test, or is that live blood cell testing?
Well, any blood test, you can see the white blood cells aren't moving.
Okay.
And your white blood cells are your patrol, and they go around the body getting rid of impurities, viruses, cancer cells, whatever is bugging you. And if you don't have that patrol, that's when you can get sick.
Very interesting. Now, you say that medical treatment including surgery and radiation chemotherapy, that they fail to stop the growth of cancer in the majority of cases, and that 50% eventually die of cancer even after medical treatment. Are those statistics still valid today?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
You know, the whole thing, Ginny, is they haven't changed their approach to cancer. It's sort of cemented into law now that they can't prescribe anything else. And so the drug companies have taken over the radiologists. You know, even fifth graders know that radiation causes cancer. Why would they radiate a sick person is beyond belief. Chemotherapy is a horrible poison. It started out as a mixture of chlorine and fabric dye solvent. Now it's artificially made, of course, but it's similar to what I just described. This is supposed to, quote-unquote, eradicate cancer cells. All it does is really poison the patient. The only way to eradicate cancer cells is to have your own immune system and healing system do the job. And we have plenty of ammunition. We have white blood cells, T cells, macrophages. We have tumor necrosis factor. We have a whole battery of what is inside our body to eradicate cancer cells. And actually, it's the only way to do it.
And when you talk about diet, I know you mentioned the carrot juice. Do you have more anti-cancer foods as part of your MOTEP program?
Yes, I do list in both books in the index foods that have Laetrile or vitamin B17, and this is a natural form of chemotherapy. And we should be incorporating these foods from the list, some of the foods every day, into our diet to prevent cancer and especially to heal cancer.
So we could create our own organic chemotherapy with the vegetables and fruits that we have
right,
access to.
And apricot kernels have the most.
You know, my grandmother used to tell me about that. You know, whenever she would can the apricot, she would always put that little kernel in there. It's like a little almond.
It's like an almond. It's a little bit more bitter, but it does. The body can use it to kill cancer cells.
And it's
a natural form of cyanide.
And is that available in the healthy food stores?
You can find it in some health food stores, or you
Okay.
can just make it yourself by with a hammer.
Get very hard seeds. Very hard to get that. I always had respect for her for that.
Yeah, I've even read that you can put the seed in an oven and that would help for a while.
Make it a little easier to
cook it for a while.
There you go. There you go. All right. Now you talked about your second book, Survive Cancer. That book took you on a journey around the world, and it took you 6 years to write it. You interviewed courageous people around the world who took control of this disease and empowered themselves and their immune systems, and they healed their cancer. Can you share with us kind of some of the stories that of the folks that you met around the world, and just how they went about healing their cancer.
Yeah, there was one interesting, well, they're all interesting. There was a woman who was in a horrible plane crash. And, of course, the crash was such an impact that her seatbelt was useless and her head hit the ceiling of the airplane.
Mm.
But she lived through it, but she got a brain tumor. And she developed a health program very similar to mine. She lost a lot of weight. She got rid of her enemy list. She had a list of people she hated, and she got rid of that. And she started running, and eventually the tumor went away. And this is without any surgery.
Yeah, and this is the second time you've mentioned the exercise piece. And is that because it gets our blood circulating and gets that oxygenation going on?
Exactly, yes. Oxygen, it turns out, kills cancer cells. And there's a fellow who, I'm trying to think of his name, who got the Nobel Prize for proving that if you take a normal cell and deprive it of oxygen, you create a cancer cell. Warburg, that's his name.
Mm-hmm.
Otto Warburg. And he proved this, that oxygen kills cancer cells. So when you're exercising, you have to bring in more oxygen because when you're expending energy, and the body will need more oxygen than usual. For instance, when you're running or even doing weightlifting or machines with your arms, for instance, you're going to have to take in more oxygen.
And does that have anything to do with the alkalinity and the acidity of your body?
Well, that's another factor. Of course, oxygen is going to cleanse your body, but you need to have your diet very alkaline, and that is eliminating a lot of fat meats and gravies and ice cream and all that fatty stuff, chips, and you go on a really lean diet. I give you the diet. I call it a detoxification diet, a detox diet. And I give you a diet. And survive cancer, I even give you some recipes.
Because cancer can't survive or can't grow in an alkaline environment, is that?
Exactly.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm outlining a basic way to live where you detox your body and your mind at the same time. You do meditation, you do chanting, prayer, you get rid of all the junk in your body and also all the negativity in your mind at the same time, because anger can kill you, and eating a lot of fat can kill you. So what we're doing is modifying the whole lifestyle, and I'm talking about spiritual, mental, physical, diet, exercise, visualization, and the whole thing. Group therapy, forgiving people for their offenses against you. You have to forgive. Do it for yourself. You can keep a grudge, but this is the only thing keeping a grudge is going to do. It's not going to hurt the other person.
Right. It's and the idea of group therapy to help facilitate that is a good one, certainly.
I think that was an important part of my program, and I did get myself into a group, and it was wonderful and healing to talk about my experiences with a sympathetic group.
Right. All right, you have some more stories from your book.
Well, there was a guy in Japan that I interviewed over the internet over a course of a year or two. And he had horrible cancer and went into the hospital, and they gave him a lot of chemo, and he couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand the smell. So he went up on the roof to sleep because he couldn't stand the odor, and they thought he was going to throw himself off, so they sent him home. And that's when he figured out how to get well.
And again, he did it more naturally.
Yes, he said the doctors don't have the answer.
Mm-hmm.
He said a lot of doctors die of cancer because they can't get into the creation of health. And I did meet another doctor who asked me why his artist patients get well, whereas other patients do not. And I said, well, because we understand creation. We create our art, and we understand if you want to get well, you have to create health.
And art is, or having whatever our individual art and passion is a big piece of creating health. Yeah.
Absolutely. I find that my art is very therapeutic, and I do work at it every day, and I'm very fortunate to be able to show it and sell it around the country. I will have a show in New York in September at the Art Armory at the Art Fair with McCall, MCCOLL, Fine Art. And you can look up their website and see what they've sold of mine already. And they're a fabulous gallery located in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. And they've only had my work 6 months, and they've sold 6 pieces already.
And you said that you work on your art every day, and that's part of the MOTEP system.
Well, I think the creating whatever you like to do. You don't have to be a painter like I am, but for instance, singing, dancing, cooking, sewing, writing, whatever it is you like to do. I think it's important to have a creative outlet for yourself and do something for yourself that's other than helping others or sacrificing your life for others.
And do you think that these natural healing methods that you're pioneering and that other courageous people around the world are stepping forward and sharing, do you think that this is paving the way for cancer treatment in the future, healing in a way that strengthens our immune systems rather than destroys them?
Well, I think there is hope. Dr. Susan Love emailed me that seems to be the new approach, is strengthening the immune system rather than quote-unquote eradicating bad cancer cells.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, actually cancer cells are not bad. They're weak cells that do not have enough nourishment, that have been under stress, that have been under the distress of toxins, of abuse of the body, of emotional distress.
Well, that's certainly a different way to look at cancer instead of seeing it as an enemy. To see it as
it's really not an enemy. And I sat next to a beautiful black woman, only 25 years old, at the P.F. Chang's the other night, and she, after I had finished my meal and I was about to leave, she broke down and said that she was sick. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" And she said, "I have a brain tumor." And so I said, "Well, you're sitting next to the right person." And then I started discussing with her a few things, like the first thing I asked is, "Do you want to live?" And she said yes, but she didn't have enough oomph to that yes. And I can often tell from the quality of the yes, if it's yes, hardly anyone tells me no. But I can tell from the quality of the yes whether they really want to live or not. And the second thing I ask is, are you willing to do the work to get well?
Mm-hmm.
And I can also tell from the quality of that response. And those are the two crucial points. When I heard her yes, that was not enthusiastic enough for me to believe it. I asked her to please find the reasons why she wanted to live.
Mm-hmm. And to pull those out to be more in the forefront of her life.
Yeah, I do have an exercise I give people as part of the program. It's in my second book, Survive Cancer, where they have the lucky exercise, and you write the phrase, I am lucky, and then you fill in the blank 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And you do sit down and write this out. I am lucky I have my home. I'm lucky I have my art. I'm lucky I have, I can go on and on. I'm lucky I can breathe. I'm lucky I can see. I'm lucky but I work with this fellow who had skin cancer, Mark. And he came to my studio, and the only thing he had was some lesions on his leg. Otherwise, he walked into my studio fine. And he was a successful lawyer, and he had a beautiful spread, not just a house, but a spread, in Palos Verdes Peninsula. He had horses. He had a beautiful wife. He had a son. This man had success. He had everything. And yet, when I asked him to do the lucky exercise, Ginny, he told me he could only think of two things.
So he wasn't really pursuing what it was that his heart wanted and that his heart needed.
Well, something was wrong, and he lacked appreciation for what he had. That's why I have people do this exercise when they get it on paper and see how lucky they are. And I can list 500 things right now that I'm lucky to have. But unless you can sit down and list 10 things, you really need to look hard at your life.
With appreciation.
Yeah, if you don't have appreciation, most people would look at Mark and just be full of green with envy at all he had, and yet he couldn't look at his life and appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Do you see cancer treatment changing globally in your travels?
I think there are attempts. There's people who run conferences. There's people who ask me to lecture, who want to help promote the books, who want to gain insight. I speak at the Cancer Convention, Cancer Control Convention, often here. It's every year in Los Angeles at the Sheraton Universal. And I've done TV, I've done radio, I've done internet, I've done a lot to get this word out, and I do have some people who will read the book and do the program, but it's usually the rare individual. It's not the general population. The general population is going to follow what the doctor says to do. And they are limited by law and their education to do the old-fashioned chemo, radiation, and surgery, which they all know does not work. They know this. They know it kills the patient.
Well, it's very interesting when you mention Susan Love. I know all of her work is focused pretty much on breast cancer, and for her to say that healing the immune system and strengthening the immune system is the direction that we need to be going in. That's huge.
It is huge. But, you know, she had cancer herself.
Mhm.
Did you know that?
Well, she had leukemia.
Leukemia, yeah.
So
now she's more interested. But she did have me speak at a room full of scientists. She gave me 10 minutes. I was really amazed. The scientists seemed to feel I was speaking some kind of foreign language. I was from Mars.
I think it's a more ancient earth-based knowledge and science. You know, it's our old traditional science, certainly. Well, you know, Susan, it's stories like yours that you've shared with us that give us hope and that also instruct us to do our own research and to listen to our own spirit. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us today before we close?
My website is www.susanhmoss.com. You can see all my books, and I have 3 books now, and my art. And you can see videos, and you can view my linseed oil that I'm coming out with that makes it safe for artists to work all day in their studio without fumes.
Really? That's amazing. That's very nice to know about.
And my phone number is 323-255-3382. In case they want to call, they're welcome.
All right. And again, Susan's books are Keep Your Breasts, Preventing Breast Cancer the Natural Way, and Survive Cancer, A Natural Approach to Healing and Prevention. And her website is www.susanhmoss.com, and that's MOSS. And you mentioned a third book. What is the third book, Susan?
Oh, I wrote a thriller called The Accident Stager.
Okay. All right. Fiction, a little fiction. Okay.
Yeah, I hope it becomes a movie someday.
Oh, that's very good. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing some of your work with us, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing in the world, certainly, and that you'll continue to do in the future. You can certainly go to Susan's website and check out her artwork as well. So thank you again, Susan Moss, for your inspiring journey and for participating in this telesummit on preventing cancer.
Thank you, Jenny. I enjoyed it.
And thank you to all of you who have listened in, and I hope that we've informed and inspired you in many ways that improve your health and your longevity. If you're looking for new ideas and the latest information on preventing cancer, please try to catch more of our podcasts in this series on green lifestyles and sustainability.